Right then, today we're going to do lesson 3, the Aya healing pyramid. So let's get straight into it. Well, actually, no, sorry. Before I start, let me just say that now we're going to do a series of lessons which are all about self-healing. Now, we do this in another course called the Pyramid Course. Some of you will have done that course. Some of you may have done 1 or 2 or lessons of that course. That's a course that we run on Saturday mornings once a month, and it's for the general public. So it's a course of 7 lessons, and we go through the Aya healing pyramid. That's why we call it the Pyramid Course. The Aya healing pyramid we talked about in the first lesson here in FASTRAC, and it's our concept of self-healing, where we split the human system up into certain layers, and then we apply certain self-healing techniques to each one of those layers to keep them healthy. So that's the course that we run for the general public. So that's actually part of this course as well, because if you remember, in our Network Healers program, we have clinic and we have health flow. The clinic is a mixture of self-healing and energy healing, because self-healing really is a kind of a rebranding of spiritual evolution or spiritual development or spiritual practice, you could say. So we're trying to bring that spiritual evolution or spiritual development into the mainstream, into the general public, and we're calling it self-healing. That's what we're really doing. And the purpose of self-healing is to increase well-being. So as you go through these next 7 lessons, I want to say something first of all to remind you guys that actually self-healing is not really for you guys, because you spent thousands of years doing that already to get to the point of Kundalini awakening and self-realization. So this, as you go through this, these 7 lessons, try and look at it from the perspective of a healer, teaching it to other people, basically. All right, so let's get cracking. So here we go. Hopefully everyone can see that. Shout if you can't. So this is lesson 3, the Aya healing pyramid. And here's just a quick reminder of the principles of network healers. I won't spend much time on this. You've seen this before. You can always pause the video later on if you want to go back over that. But let's crack on. So we started our first lesson by talking about the silent inner peace revolution. So I'm just going to go over this quickly here just to remind you that this is what this is all about, really. The campaign that's the central theme to everything we do. So what is the silent revolution? Well, the silent revolution is a revolution within the psychology or spirituality of every individual. And when we get people to look inside themselves and heal what's going on within, then naturally, on a collective level, that spreads to outside oneself. So it's about inner peace versus outer peace. But we get to that outer peace or collective peace by everyone looking within themselves and finding the silent inner peace of their own awareness. And going on a self-healing journey is the route to that silent inner peace. So the silent revolution is all about self-healing, really, individual self-healing. And if enough people go on a self-healing journey, then it changes our society, it evolves our society. And this creates the concept, or our concept, not our concept at all, of the golden world. And it's certainly not our concept. It's been talked about for a long, long time. Sometimes it's called a new earth. But we're calling it the golden world or the healed world. Now, one thing to mention here is that we may be accused of idealism. Because when people look out of the window with all the stuff that's going on in the world, it's easy to lose hope. It's easy to lose heart and think that the world is just on its way down or imploding. So when you say to people, you know, we can actually create change, individually speaking, and then it has an impact on the whole of the collective of the planet, then people can easily say, that's impossible. Look out the window, look what's going on. No one's going to listen. But we want to try and give hope to people that change can happen. But it takes time. So this is not going to happen overnight. It takes time to change a society. It takes time to evolve a society. And we're not talking about violent change. We're not talking about takedown of institutions or political revolutions or anything like that. A peaceful change takes time to happen. It allows people to change in their own time, basically. So we need to start this immediately, of course. It has started already, you could say. So now we're going to talk about the Aya healing pyramid, which is our concept of self-healing. So what is self-healing? So this is the Aya healing pyramid, which you have seen before. It's a three-dimensional structure. It's a tetrahedron. It's got information on three sides. And what we're going to do is today we're going to show you an overview of the Aya healing pyramid, go into it a little bit more detail than we did the other day in the first lesson. So let's just start off by naming the layers. You've seen this before, so this is just revision. There's three sides to the pyramid. So the blue side is side one. That's the layers of the pyramid. And as I said before, we have split the human system up into these 5 different layers. And each layer has an impact on the layer underneath it. So there is a cascading effect. And we'll talk about that in this lesson. We'll go through that in detail, that cascading effect of each layer to the next. But you could say that health and well-being cascades down the pyramid. And it can be positive health and well-being, or you could say it can be negative health and well-being. It's like a waterfall. Whatever you put in the top of the waterfall cascades down through the layers. So if you get the top right, well, everything tends to cascade into place, or into balance. Or if you get the top wrong, everything tends to cascade out of balance. So that's side one. Side two of the pyramid are the self-healing exercises that we apply to each one of the layers to keep each layer healthy. And we'll go through some of them today. And side three is the results of self-healing. These are the things that we can expect to see along the way through a journey of self-healing. You could also say these are the goals of self-healing if somebody is just starting a self-healing journey. And we think that everybody needs to be on a self-healing journey. So self-healing is not a cure for a disease or illness. That's one thing we need to make very clear to people when they come to us and we start teaching them self-healing. Because quite often people only start seeking this when they do have a problem. So the first thing we want to say is this is not a cure for a disease or illness. This is not going to miraculously cure somebody's problems. This is a way of living well. And this links back to the spiritual side of things, the spiritual evolution side of things. This is a way of living well and increasing our well-being, of course. But the irony is that actually the longer that you perform self-healing techniques throughout your life, the more chance you do have of keeping ill health away. So we can say that for sure. But it's not a quick fix. We need to get people away from the idea of quick fixes, magic pills, because, people love that kind of thing at the moment, don't they? So we've got to try and bring back the idea of self-discipline, bring back the idea of determination, tenacity, those sort of characteristics, really. And build things, and longevity as well. That things build slowly. The best things build slowly, you could say. And that's what self-healing is like. You can get some quick effects from self-healing techniques, of course. If you do some meditation, you're going to feel good afterwards. You're going to feel peaceful. You do some breath work, it's going to make you feel immediately good. However, the real benefits come in the long term. When you practice self-healing techniques over the long term, that's where you see the real growth, the real benefits. So those are the three sides of the pyramid. So let's go into it in a little bit more detail now. And let's start with the spiritual layer, the top of the pyramid. So this is the top of the pyramid, so it's going to impact all of the layers underneath because of that cascading effect. So if you get the top right, just repeating myself, you get the top right, things tend to cascade into place. You could say it's the most important layer of the pyramid. That's debatable. It's best to work on all the layers at once. But if someone's only going to work on one layer, I guess the spiritual layer would be best because it impacts all the way down the pyramid. But hopefully we can get people to work on all the layers of the pyramid. That's what the Aya Healing Pyramid is all about. So what is the spiritual layer? Because The word spiritual is a very loaded word. It means all sorts of things to different people. There's a wide range of things it could possibly mean, right? So we have to be very clear in explaining what we mean when we're using this word. And we don't mean it in a religious sense, of course. I mean, you guys know this already, but of course. But this is what we teach to people. This is how we're teaching it to people. We don't mean it in a religious sense. So let's explain exactly what we mean by the spiritual layer. So to understand what the spiritual layer is, we've got to talk about the mask, or the mask identity. So the mask is actually part of the psychological layer. Now we're calling it a mask because, quite often when you call it an ego, quite often that can trigger people sometimes. So we're kind of a little bit careful about how we use that word ego, because really ego sounds extremely negative, doesn't it? But really all it means in this context, all it really means is identity. In the spiritual context, the ego means identity, which is why it's sometimes called the egoic identity. But here we're calling it the mask, or the mask identity, because it is like a mask. It is like a psychological mask that everybody carries around on their face, and people use it to interact with other people. It's a social construct. It's an individual social construct. Now, are we the mask? Are you the mask? Is that the real person? Because the mask identity, which is part of the personality, if you think about this, changes all the way through one's life. Somebody's personality and identity can be so different at the start of their life towards the end, rather than towards the end of their life. It goes up and down. It goes all over the place. One minute we're up here, next minute we're down there. It all kind of depends on what's going on around us as well, and what other people think of us, things like that. Self-confidence, the confidence scale or lack of confidence scale is all within that identity. Is that who you are? Is that really who you are? This completely impermanent thing? The fact that it's completely impermanent and changes from one place to another kind of is like saying that it doesn't really exist. Is that what we're saying? That we don't really exist? Well, what we're saying is that it's a false identity. And there is something behind the mask which is the real you. So think about this. Think about your life. The personality's gone probably up and down here and there, depending on our memories, experiences. But there is a part of you that hasn't changed. There is a part of you that was the same when you were a child and is the same right now. Has anyone got a question? Any questions so far on what I've said? No? Okay. So there's a part of you which hasn't changed all the way through your life. It felt like you when you were a child. What it feels like to be you. It felt like you. It still feels like you, doesn't it? So there is a part which is unchanging. It hasn't changed at all throughout the course of your life. That's the bit we need to find. Because when we find it, we realise it's our own awareness. And it's beyond mind. And when we do find it, we don't actually find it because it's non-physical. We realise it. But when we realise it, we realise that it is made of inner peace. Or that's where inner peace is actually coming from. So the spiritual layer is the silent inner peace of our own awareness. And that is our true identity. So there's a false identity within the psychology of the mind. And then there is a true identity behind the mind, just waiting to be found. The true identity which is silent and it's peaceful and it's conscious. And it's completely untouchable. It's completely unaffected by the contents of the mind. So how do we get there? What are the self-healing techniques that we use to get there? So we go to side 2 of the pyramid, and here it's the journey of meditation. The journey of meditation is how we get to the spiritual layer. Now we're going to go into this in more detail in the lesson, spiritual layer. But just briefly, the journey of meditation is a journey and it takes time. However, it's actually very, very simple. And the first thing we learn on the journey of meditation or I should say, the first thing we are teaching people on a journey of meditation is the concept of the subject and the object. That's the first thing we should learn in the journey of meditation. What is the subject? What is the object? To understand that when we're meditating on something, and by the way, meditation is just focusing on one thing, concentrating. I mean, it's the easiest concept in the world to describe. It's focusing on one thing. And when we do that, we make a split. We make a split between the subject and the object. We are the subject. You are the subject doing the meditating. And the object is what we're focused on in the mind. So we use the mind to focus on an object of meditation. And that object can be all sorts of things, but we'll talk about that later on. But that's the very first thing in the journey of meditation that we should be teaching, the subject and the object. The reason why is because it becomes very important later on, because the idea, the whole goal of meditation, the reason why it was invented thousands of years ago, was to find the subject, was to find the true self. That peaceful awareness, which is just watching, which is just looking out of your eyes. That's the subject, and it's beyond mind. So that's the journey of meditation, and we'll go into that much more in the lesson, Spiritual Layer. So it's because you've been meditating for multiple lives, for a long time. So that spiritual journey, which we're calling self-healing here, actually needs to be practiced over many incarnations, because the higher mind has to learn, go through a lesson learning, the Kundalini has to grow, and levels of karma have to come down. And one of the ways that we stop producing more negative karma, or even removing some of our karma, is through meditation, and lots of different types of meditation. To get to the point of self-realization or Kundalini awakening, which allows it, you have to have gone through many lifetimes of doing self-healing exercises, or as it was called, spiritual practices. So yeah, if you haven't done any meditating in this life, and then it's perfectly possible to have nothing to do with spirituality in a life, in this incarnation, and then have a Kundalini awakening spontaneously. That's perfectly possible, because the work has already been done. You're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And in fact, we are seeing many people have Kundalini awakenings that have nothing to do with spirituality, haven't even thought about it in this lifetime. So yeah, that's perfectly normal. But when the Kundalini awakening happens and people start going through self-realization, things will start coming back, things will start to change, because one of the most important things about self-realization is that it is the source, which eventually the source realizes itself through that person. So it's inevitable that people will get back into certain aspects of spirituality. Okay, anyone else got any questions before I move on? All right, so let's talk about the psychological layer. So what do we mean by the psychological layer? Well, the psychological layer is everything within the human personality. Your subconscious memories, your personality characteristics, values, identity, all of that stuff. Now, the analogy that we like to use in this lesson anyway is that of a house. So imagine that your mind is a house. You are not your mind. Your mind is a calculating machine with either conscious thoughts or unconscious thoughts, and lots of processes going on in the background. That's not you. That's not the true self. You are not your mind. You are not your personality. You are the awareness behind the mind, which can be separated from the mind. So, your house is not you. You dwell in your house, don't you? You live in your house, just like awareness lives in the mind, but the house is not you. So everything in this brickwork of the house is subconscious. Everything in the roof is conscious. So we've got a stack of memories there. We go about our lives experiencing stuff, don't we? We go about our lives making memories every day of our life. And these memories get stacked together, one on top of the other, and it's a bit of a mess. I've made it look like a bit of a mess there because that's kind of how it feels sometimes, isn't it? Because these memories, of course, the brain is organising them in a certain way, but it feels like they're a bit higgledy-piggledy, and they cause us a lot of problems sometimes as well. Could do with a bit more order, let's say. Out of those stack of memories, we get a personality. It just arises. It arises from personality characteristics because of those memories. And out of those personality characteristics, we derive a set of values, how we live our lives, what we find important. A value is just like a characteristic or an emotion that people have prioritized who think it's important. So we live our lives by a set of values. Now, the identity is also wrapped up in this point here, but we don't talk about that yet. We're going to talk about that in the psychological layer lesson. Out of the subconscious appears conscious thoughts, because everything in the roof of this diagram is conscious. So our conscious thoughts, and here we're talking about the mind stream, this constant flow of thoughts that we have running through our mind all day long and all night. They are arising from our subconscious. It is the pile or the mass of memories and personality characteristics and values which is actually producing this mind stream. Because as the personality changes through your life, your mind stream changes accordingly, doesn't it? It's whatever you're going through at the time, let's say, impacts the conscious mind stream. And then this is the interesting bit. Conscious thoughts then influence how those memories are laid down. Now we go into this more in the psychological layer lesson. But if you think about it, this is an evolutionary tactic, and emotions are actually included or involved in this. But thoughts and emotions actually impact how memories are laid down. What you were thinking at the time impacts how a memory is laid down. What you are feeling at the time impacts how a memory is laid down. Now you can imagine this as a evolutionary tactics way back in early animals when mind and emotions were just evolving. You could say that emotions evolved as a survival mechanism, for example, feeling fear in a dangerous situation, remembering that fear and then keeping that animal alive because it's worrying about that fear and it's trying to keep away from that fear or stop feeling that negative emotion. So when an emotion is felt strongly in the moment, it imprints that memory deeper and deeper. So going back to this diagram, you've got a cycle here. Because it's the present moment thoughts and emotions which impact how the memories are laid down. The memories are all determining the personality and the characteristics and the values and the conscious thoughts, which are impacting how the memories are laid down. So there's a cycle here. And quite often people can spiral into negativity because of that slight negative dominance that we talked about last time. People tend to spiral into negativity easier than spiraling into positivity if you leave the mind on its own. Now, there is a part of this that no one has any real control over, and that is in the subconscious. You can't choose how the processes work in the subconscious, but there is a part of this that you can have control over. And that is, of course, the conscious thoughts. So if we can control our conscious thoughts, we can control how those memories are laid down. And if we can control how those memories are laid down, then we can control the personality characteristics and the values. It's about taking control of our own personality. And this is what self-healing is all about in part. It's choosing healthy characteristics and removing unhealthy ones. Like things that cause us anxiety, the perfect example. So much anxiety in the world right now. We can choose to remove it through training our own mind, taking control over our own mind. So when is the time to act? Well, when do we have conscious thoughts? Well, that's pretty easy, isn't it? It's always now, isn't it? It's not in the future or in the past. We have conscious thoughts always in the present moment. So that's the time to act. Always in the psychological layer, that is. So if we go to slide 2 of the pyramid, that's why we've categorized these self-healing exercises as awareness of the mind stream. And there's quite a few different exercises within that, but they all start with having an awareness of the mind stream. Because it's too easy to go through your day without realizing all of those thoughts that are constantly going through our minds. It's too easy to just not notice them. But it is that voice in the head that we need to notice to start with. We need to be aware of those thoughts that are going through our mind, because everything then is has a knock-on effect from that mind stream, which we'll talk about in the lower layers of the pyramid. But awareness of the mind stream is so important to have any level of control over our thoughts, and therefore any level of control over our personalities, and so on down the pyramid. Okay, anyone got any questions about the psychological layer? Yep. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, and right at the start of the evolutionary process with emotions, you could say that it started with the base ones, the base survival ones, like fear is going to be probably the first one, maybe. Anger as well, and hate, those really visceral, basic emotions, and then as it evolved into when animals started living in social groups, different types of emotions would have evolved to do with keeping the social group together, working in a cohesive manner. So you could say that yes, it applies to all negative emotions, because they've all got a purpose, and they've all got an evolutionary purpose, and some may get imprinted more deeply than others. I'm not sure, but I would say that that you can apply that to all negative emotions. Yeah, no, I'm not sure really. It's something that we should look into at some point. But I think the mechanism will be roughly the same, because they have an evolutionary purpose as well, and they're going to be survival related as well. But I think there's a dominance over that. They're not created equally. Let's say. And for some reason, maybe it's because the original negative emotions are more emergency emotions. So it's either live or die in the moment, whereas something like the pleasure which animals get from eating is maybe not an emergency situation type of emotion. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so a really good example of us trying to implement that is what our self-healing course, our foundations project, where we're writing self-healing courses for different professions and different types of people and stuff. And one of them that we are just starting to write now is for the military. Now, this is an extreme example just to illustrate the point that you've just made. But for people that are going to go away in the military and fight a war, for example, which of course no one wants, but if you can't do anything about it, at least let's try and help the people who are actually going to go through those traumatic experiences. One thing that we can actually help with in going through traumatic experiences is through meditation. Different types of meditation techniques, because if we can train people to be in a certain meditative state while they're going through a traumatic experience, then actually that will impact how those memories are laid down. Because there's so much pain from PTSD, for example, or people coming back from traumatic situations, and it's all about the memories that are locked away, that are traumatic, that it acts like a complete block in their life, and comes back in all sorts of visceral, horrible ways. If we can impact how those memories are laid down, then actually they can help themselves. They can have less trauma when they come back. So, yes, just going back to your question in a more general way, I think that as the world evolved, as culture evolves, as conflict gets less and less, and also as culture, as self-healing techniques get brought more into culture, then people will be more aware of what affects the memory and what affects how memories are laid down. So it's all about getting it into healthcare really, and doing more research on it and getting it more well known about how the mind stream impacts people's memories. Okay, so let's go on to the emotional layer. So the emotional layer, and it sounds obvious, but actually it sounds obvious what is emotions. Everybody kind of knows what emotions are, but actually that's not 100% the case. When you're teaching this, not everyone really has got a grip of exactly what emotions are. But here what we're talking about, we are talking about the things that make us feel good or bad, put simply. Now we go into it in much more detail than that in the emotional layer lesson, of course. But there's a whole emotional cycle to understand about the emotional layer. So when we say emotions are what makes us feel good or bad, you can broadly categorize, as you guys well know, emotions into positive or negative. But understanding the emotional cycle is what's important here. Understanding how the emotional cycle works and what fuels the emotional cycle is so important for self-healing. Because otherwise, how are we going to have any level of control over it? Because well-being, you could say, is all about feeling well or feeling better. I mean, it's in the name, isn't it? Being well. So what is the emotional cycle? Well, if we boil the emotional cycle down into its bare constituents, we have, excuse me, we have thoughts and emotions. So have you ever noticed that when you are feeling a negative emotion, we'll stick with the negative emotions for a minute. When you're feeling a negative emotion, it is always preceded by a thought pattern. So we start thinking about something, it activates the emotion in the body, which we feel is a sort of negative fizzing somewhere in the body. And then that emotion triggers more of the thinking. And then we go round and round in a circle, in a cycle. And this cycle can be difficult to break. Now, sometimes we can get locked in a cycle of something like frustration or something like that, or anxiety, or whatever it is. And it can last, whatever, minutes, hours, days. Some people get locked in this for a whole lifetime. Imagine a family feud or a long-standing bitter argument between two people in a family or friends or whatever. But this can actually last a whole lifetime. They might not always be feeling that emotion all the way through that lifetime, but it keeps coming back. Every time it gets triggered, it keeps coming back. Spikes of negative emotion. Now that over time is extremely damaging because that impacts all the layers underneath it. So let's look at it in a little bit more detail. So here we've expanded the emotional cycle a little bit more. So you've got thinking, you've got emotional energy, you've got emotion chakras, and you've got the emotion. So first of all, usually there's a trigger, isn't there? Now, what I've done here with this little diagram is that the blue square bit is everything inside you. Anything that's not in that blue square is not inside your body. Now, usually there's a trigger to the emotional cycle, and usually it's outside of you. Something's triggered you at work, something's triggered you, family or social life or whatever it is, or whether ideology, whatever it is, the trigger is usually outside of you. Sometimes it does come from inside of you, from your subconscious thinking patterns, but we'll leave that for a minute. Usually it's outside of you. And you can't really do much about things that are outside of you. Sometimes you can, of course, but many times you can't do anything about the trigger. But what you can do something about is what goes on inside of you. And as we can see, the emotional cycle really is all inside of you. So the trigger activates thinking patterns, and we start thinking about that trigger. Then that activates emotional energy, the production of emotional energy. Now, emotional energy is a type of magnetic field, as is everything in the bioenergy layer, really. And there is crossover here. This is in the emotional layer, but some aspects of it do cross over into the bioenergy layer because emotional energy is a type of magnetic field. It's a magnetic field with programming on it, and it's programmed by the thoughts in our mind. Now, this is the emotional energy that I'm sure you're all aware of, that you can often feel from other people, because when too much of it is produced, it comes out of people, it comes out of their chakras, and it goes into the collective mind. through chakra cords, and it gets downloaded by other people. And then it activates somebody else's emotional cycle. Because emotional energy has a particular programming on it, which is designed to activate one of the emotion chakras. So we have 5 emotion chakras: the throat chakra, the heart chakra, the solar plexus, the sacral, and the root chakra, the base of the spine. Now, there are hundreds of chakras around the body, but they have many different roles and are specialized for different things. Here we're talking about these 5 emotion regulating chakras. Now, when emotional energy is produced, it is coded for a particular chakra, and it activates that chakra. That chakra activates the emotional response in the material body. And that's the limbic system and the endocrine system and the nervous system, all the material body systems that are involved with emotions. And healthcare knows quite a lot about that now, of course. And just to be clear, emotional energy is not part of mainstream science or mainstream healthcare. We have to do one thing when we're teaching this to other people, to the general public, we have to remember to try and be clear where the line is between what is accepted mainstream science and what is not accepted mainstream science, or what is maybe been known culturally for thousands of years perhaps, but it's not part of mainstream science. Always try and remember to let people know where the line is, because we don't want people thinking that we're making claims that are that some of these things are accepted in science. Anyway, so thinking produces emotional energy. Emotional energy activates one of the emotion chakras. That activates the emotional response in the material body. And then there's a feedback loop which activates more thinking. And we go round and round in this cycle. And if this cycle continues and doesn't stop, that's when too much emotional energy is produced. And that's when it gets expelled out into the collective mind and other people can feel it. Or it gets blocked up. So this is where we have to talk about this word here on the screen, which has just appeared on the right. Repression. So I'm sure you're aware of the word repression. It's a well-known word in psychology and psychotherapy. But what it means is, it means bottling up emotions, not allowing yourself to feel emotions. Now, it's a well-known concept in psychology that if repression actually is not a good thing because it comes back in a big way at some point. Now, what actually is happening in energy is that repression is what blockages are in chakras. So when we don't allow ourselves to feel that emotion, we are keeping hold of that emotional energy within the chakra, and that's what blocks up the chakra. So we've got to stay away from repression. Whatever we do, we've got to try and get people to not repress their emotions, not hold on to that energy, and that will reduce the amount of blockages that happen in the emotion chakra. Now, there is a fuel to this whole cycle. Can't hear you there. Do you mean oppression as in people imposing their will on other people? Yeah, well, your intuition trying to tell us something, probably. Yeah, sometimes our higher minds will pop something in your mind and make you say it. And sometimes we don't even know why. Sometimes we do know why, but sometimes we don't even know why. But it usually triggers something. It triggers a conversation about something, or it leads us in a way that we can understand something better. So I just want to say that just, I guess, took the opportunity to say there about everybody's higher minds and how we work in a network, and that happens all the time. So then that goes for everybody. If anyone's got something that pops in their mind and they feel like, I really need to say that, I don't know why, just say it, because it will spark something. There's a reason for it. And maybe it was that conversation, I don't know, but oppression and repression, let me think. I guess it would make sense in, let's say, some of the chakras, like the throat chakra, possibly. For example, when somebody is being oppressed, when somebody is feeling like they're being oppressed, they're not feeling like they're able to express themselves. And that will actually cause a blockage in the throat chakra. So yes, there could be some links there. Yeah. So there is a fuel there is a fuel to the emotional cycle, and understanding the fuel is one of the keys to self-healing, one of the keys to spiritual evolution. Because of course the fuel is karma, or as we call it, karma emotion, because karma is a transport system for emotional memory. And if this emotional cycle has a fuel, then now we can call it an emotion engine. Now we go into this in much more detail in the emotional layer lesson, and also we've got a couple of lessons all about karma as well. So that's probably as far as we want to go for this particular discussion here. Well, or this particular lesson. But it is karma which is fueling that emotional reaction. So whenever we are feeling an emotion, we're burning karma. And whenever we are thinking about it, we are producing karma. Now, quite often it's thought that karma is the fruit of actions. But if you think about actions are always preceded by thoughts. So karma, what we're saying is that karma is a biological system of emotional memory, and it is activated by our thinking processes, our thought patterns in the mind. And when we're feeling an emotional reaction, that's when we're actually burning old. So looking at side 2 of the pyramid for the emotional layer, the set of practical self-healing techniques that we use for that is karma emotion work. Now that's, again, a set of practical exercises, and that's the title. But emotional meditation is one of the biggest ones. One of the biggest, I say, one of the most important that we can teach to people. So what is emotional meditation? Well, we're going to talk more about emotional meditation much later on. However, in its most basic terms, it's a very simple thing, but very powerful technique. When we're feeling an emotion, we go and focus on that emotion and we meditate on that emotion. And that's doing various things. And if you remember from what I said earlier, no worries. Yes, so when we meditate, there is a subject and an object. You are the subject doing the meditating. The object is what you are focused on. And that object can be all sorts of different things. And in this case, it's the emotion in the body. We go and find that emotion in the body and we make it an object of meditation. We'll go into it in more detail later on. But really what it's doing is, if we go back to this emotion engine here, and we apply emotional meditation. And this is a very powerful technique to teach to people because so many people are a slave to their emotions. They are unable to figure out and unable to have any level of control over emotional reactions. So this is a very good technique for people. When we meditate on emotions, these things happen here. So it stops you thinking about the trigger, because when we meditate, we're stopping the mind stream. That's what happens when you meditate, when you focus on one thing. All the rest of the mind stream sort of fizzles away. So you stop thinking about the trigger. And then as you go around the cycle, emotional energy to emotion chakras, you're stopping the act of repression because you're allowing yourself to feel that emotion. You're not running away from it. Repression, you know when someone's repressing an emotion because they're running away from the emotion. They don't want to talk about it, don't want to feel it, don't allow themselves to feel it. Put the radio on, put the TV on, go and do something else, just will not entertain that emotion. But in emotional meditation, you are focusing on it. You're bringing it closer to you. You're making friends with it. Now, it can be quite painful and can be quite difficult if there's a lot of trauma or something like that. You have to be careful. But generally speaking, you're allowing that emotion to flow, and therefore you're not holding that energy in the chakras. You're allowing the energy out and you're not causing blockages. Therefore you're not repressing. And then we carry on around the cycle. And the most important part here, from emotion to thinking, you're cutting the cycle in half because you're meditating on that emotion. Therefore the thinking again reduces right down. You're no longer carrying on with the cycle. You're cutting the cycle in half. And very quickly, people find very quickly that the emotional reaction fizzles out and disappears. Within minutes sometimes, but it depends how strong it is. So that's a very important self-healing techniques that we teach to people in the emotional layer. Okay, any questions about the emotional layer? Oh, yeah, yeah. So that's a good point. And what I'd say here is that you can practice to do the emotion, the emotional meditation without actually looking like you're meditating. You can actually meditate while you're doing anything, in fact. And we call this task orientated meditation. So it is possible to meditate while you're doing a task. And it's the same with emotional meditation, but it takes a bit of practice. Yeah. So you're not going to go and sit down. And I guess what it looks like, what I'm saying is that you take yourself away for 5 minutes. You find that you sit down, you close your eyes. Well, actually, maybe you can do that the first few times, but after a while you get so used to it, you start to recognize that feeling of the emotion rising. And it's like an alarm bell immediately, and you're meditating on it. And you can still talk to people while you're actually meditating on it. It just takes a little bit of practice. But eventually you can, so the more you do this, and it's going on in the background is what I mean. So the emotion's going on in the background, you can feel it rising, but you're being aware of it, you're meditating on it. You can still use your mind to actually interact with people. That's how task-orientated meditation works. But eventually, the point is that you'll be able to stop the reaction before it actually even kicks in. But it just takes a little bit of practice. So at some point you'll get that feeling of that rising emotion, and then it's like meditate, bang, and then you're on it, and that actually stops it. The more you do it, the more it stops it quickly, and it doesn't then even take control. So it doesn't distract you in the end. But yeah, with a I agree with a strong emotional reaction, and the first time you do it, it's going to be tricky to do it while you're talking to people. So it just takes a bit of practice. Right then, so now we're moving on to the bioenergy layer. So what is the bioenergy layer? Well, we've talked about this a little bit already, but really, the bioenergy layer refers to magnetic fields that flow around the human body, that sustain the human body, that are produced by the human body. Now, this has been known for a long, long time in many ancient systems of healing and medicine, and many different cultures, ancient cultures. Most cultures have got some sort of aspect of the bioenergy layer within their systems of healing or medicine. So there's quite a few different things that is included in the bioenergy layer. And in this course, we're going to study some of them. Now, first of all, I would say, let's get the aura quickly out of the way. Now, don't forget, we're going to go into this in much more detail, but in terms of this lesson, we don't talk about the aura that much, because the aura, what is the aura? Okay, so the aura is now, actually, I should start by saying that many people use the word aura to describe, well, all of the bioenergy layer sometimes. But what we're doing here in this course is we're separating things out a little bit so that we can understand them individually. Because the aura is very different to the energy body, for example. The aura is an electromagnetic field. It's an emanation of subtle energy. So the aura is actually produced from the material body. It's the magnetic field which is produced from the bioelectricity in our bodies, and also the matter in our bodies, because all matter actually gives off a magnetic field. The table gives off a magnetic field. Everything that is made of atoms and molecules gives off magnetic fields. And that's what the aura is. And the aura is very useful for certain things, and some systems of healing include the aura within them. And it's very useful for diagnostic purposes sometimes as well. Reading somebody's aura, feeling the undulations and the ups and downs in the aura, you can diagnose certain things in the material body, for example. Okay, but that's an electromagnetic field. Now let's go a little bit deeper into the bioenergy layer. And what we find is that... Is somebody sent a message there? I can't see, I heard a noise. Has anyone got a question? Yes, that's right, yeah. Yeah, which is perfectly well known to science, as it happens. So science, although it doesn't use that word aura, it's very well known to science that matter gives off magnetic fields, electromagnetic fields, and electricity gives off magnetic fields. So the aura has an inner part and an outer part. One has to do with the electricity in the body, and one has to do with the matter that's giving off magnetic fields. But what is not yet known to mainstream science is that magnetic fields can hold structures. Very, very weak magnetic fields, way underneath the strength of the aura, because that's still quite a strong magnetic field if it's being given off by an electric current. Way underneath that strength, very, very weak magnetic fields can hold structures to them. This is not really known yet in mainstream science, and this is what we've got to change. This is what we've got to kind of change. But these structures can actually organize themselves together in organs and systems. Just like we've got organs and systems in the material body, we've got heart and a blood circulation system, skeletal system, etc. We've also got systems, biological systems, in our energy body and in other magnetic frameworks, in fact. I use using the energy body here because that's what we're looking at in this lesson. The pictures you can see in front of you of the energy body, different systems within the energy body. But yes, there are organs and systems, and some of these are very well known already, of course. Chakras, such a well-known word. The chakra system, that is a system of organs, and a chakra, you could say, is an energy anatomy organ. The meridian system is another system, very famous system that's part of all sorts of different ancient systems of healing. A meridian system is a system of vessels which carries energy, or in scientific terms we could call it magnetic flux. Carries this subtle energy around the body. And this is where the traditional words come in, like chi and prana and life force and subtle energy. So the bioenergy layer is very important for self-healing, crucial for self-healing, because there's so much in it which controls our well-being. And we've talked about the emotional cycle, of course, the emotion chakras. These emotion chakras regulate our emotions. The chakra is actually in the energy body, so it's also part of the bioenergy layer. And we've talked about blockages now, emotional energy blockages, which are part of our emotional cycle, but when they get blocked up in the bioenergy layer, in the energy body. And here is just a very simple example of blocked up chakras. And the one on the right, where you can see they're all black colour, that's blockages. And when you see chakras and see chakra colours and things like that, you do see blockages as dark colours. And the one on the left is clear and clean chakras, obviously. And they're a different colour, by the way, because each chakra processes a different frequency of magnetic field. Golden energy is everywhere. That's all frequencies all mixed up together. And then when we breathe that energy in through the chakras, because the chakras are entry and exit points to the outside, a bit like our mouth, breathing in and air out of. Chakras breathe in golden energy and then they filter that golden energy and separate out the different frequencies of magnetic field. And we have evolved, humans have evolved to see different frequencies of magnetic field as the spectrum of the rainbow, those different colours. Now, we think that the reason is because this sense evolved at the same time as our sight evolved as well. So we evolved to see different frequencies of light as conscious experiences of colour. And at the same time, we did the same thing with magnetic fields. That's our theory. But it's well known, it's renowned that people see chakras as different colours. Unfortunately, sometimes it's a little bit subjective because people can see it in slightly different ways sometimes. But generally speaking, it's pretty agreed that the spectrum of colour refers to the major chakras along the spine. So you can use the analogy of light, actually, when we're talking about golden energy and the different colours. We can also use the analogy of light. You know, white light that comes from the sun, is a mixture of all different frequencies of light. And you can separate them out. If you shine light through a prism, then you see the spectrum of light. You see a rainbow. Or you can see the rainbow in the sky. It's the same thing, really, shining through rain droplets. Well, it's the same thing with golden energy. You separate out all the frequencies of magnetic field with golden energy, and you get different colours or frequencies of energy. So back to the blockages. Very important for self-healing, of course, to understand the bioenergy layer, because these blockages, when they block a chakra, they do various things. Like a blocked chakra is a bit like a grenade. it will explode occasionally. It causes us massive emotional reactions. So when somebody has a blockage in an emotion chakra, their emotional reactions will be 2 or 3 times what it should be. And on top of that, it creates an imbalance within the personality as well. If you probably know the term balancing chakras, that's quite a famous term. Well, actually, you're not actually balancing chakras when you do chakra work. You're cleaning the chakra. You're removing blockages and allowing it to work properly. And in doing so, it balances the emotions that are regulated by that chakra. So balancing chakra is actually balancing emotions. And that's why we find emotional stability through things like chakra breathing and other types of breath work. Okay, and moving on to that slide, which I've just explained really. That's just showing you the imbalance that can be caused with blockages. So moving on to the meridian system. Meridian system is also very important for self-healing. In fact, in our self-healing course, we generally just talk about the chakras and the meridian system because these two are the most important, let's say, or have the most impact when we're talking about self-healing techniques. So the meridian system is a system of vessels which carries energy around the body. It takes it from the chakras and it supplies it to the rest of the body. The meridians are one-way vessels taking subtle energy in different frequencies, separated frequencies, from the chakras through to every single cell of the material body. Think of it like an artery. Artery carries oxygenated blood from the heart through to every cell of the material body. Well, a meridian system carries subtle energy from the chakras through to every cell of the material body. And we'll go into why later on. But this can also get blocked up as well. And this actually overflows from the chakra system. Emotional energy overflows from the chakra system and goes into the meridian system and starts getting blockages and connections between vessels are sticking points, and sometimes it just gets backed up and blocked up. And this is where, if somebody has a lot of blocked chakras, then they have a lot of blocked meridians, and this is where people start suffering from things like fibromyalgia pain, because when those blockages back up through the meridian system, they irritate the nervous system in the material body and cause pain. And also chronic fatigue, because that subtle energy that's carrying is essential for the energy producing mechanisms in the material body. And that's when we start talking about ATP energy and cellular respiration, but we will talk about that later on. But what we're saying is that energy is required in that reaction or chemical reaction in the cells. And therefore, if there is a slowdown of that energy, then people will start feeling chronic fatigue and not be able to produce enough energy in the material body. But park that discussion for a later date. So that's the meridian system briefly. Another system that we talk about is the free flow system and storage system, which is what we've got here. The free flow system is a system of large vessels in the body, and these are bidirectional. Energy can flow up or down these large vessels. Now, if you have felt energy in your body moving around before, and this is very common when blockages start to become free, people can start actually feeling the flow of energy down their arms and legs and up their spine, and you can actually start moving it around yourself with conscious intent. And this is what healing is all about. We're moving healing energy out through the arms. If we're using hands healing, we're moving energy out through the arms and through the hand chakras and out of our bodies. But this is the free flow system that's being used. So when we're feeling that flow of energy in the body, that's these big wide vessels of the free flow system. And as a healer, it's very important to have an unblocked free flow system. Otherwise, healing energy can't move around very successfully, and it certainly can't come out of the energy body. And there's also storage areas, which I won't go into now, but you can see there's 3 storage areas there, one at the solar plexus area, one at the heart, and then one at the throat. And you can use these in energy healing as well. You can focus energy there, and then you can You can move it from there out wherever you want it. But again, this can get blocked up as well. More overflow from negative emotional energy. As you can start to see, negative emotional energy causes havoc in the energy body. So, side 2 of the pyramid for the bioenergy layer is energy breath work. The yogic science of breath, or pranayama yoga. So there's 3 particular techniques that we teach as part of this course. As part of the pyramid course that we're teaching to people. And we'll go through that in a later lesson. But it's pretty much basic breath work. What we've tried to do is, there's so many breathing techniques. There's so much to learn. You could go a whole lifetime and only learn a little bit of it, But you don't have to. And, if you spend a whole lifetime on pranayama yoga, you're probably neglecting some of the other parts of the journey, So what we've done here is that we've condensed down what we think are the most useful exercises that are the most easiest exercises and have high efficiency for their ease of use. And we've come up with 3, and one of them is chakra breathing. But we'll talk about that later on. But really, energy breath work is what clears blockages. It's what clears the bioenergy layer, keeps the bioenergy layer healthy. And actually, just while I'm at it, the reason why is because there is a mechanism, a chakra mechanism attached to the diaphragm. And when you breathe, as you breathe in deeply, you're expanding your lungs, of course, the diaphragm's going down, air's coming into your lungs, but at the same time you're breathing in through your chakras. So this is just, it's all linked. It's part of the respiration cycle. So as you breathe in, your chakras start spinning and sucking in energy from the outside. Okay, any questions about the bioenergy layer? Yeah, the free flow system is more about moving different types of energy around the body. So what we're thinking is that it's actually very closely linked to the immune system and our systems of healing in the body, natural systems of healing. And it's how different types of energy get moved around. So for example, healing energy moves around the free flow system. And we think that healing energy actually evolved as a normal healing mechanism within the body, and also the ability to share it with others in the group. So it's all biological mechanisms, but the free flow system is a bidirectional, so energy can go anywhere. So it's a bit like there's organs that release healing energy, and then it finds its way around the body to go and do a healing job, for example. And it uses the free flow system for that. You can use energy healing on yourself to... So yes, you can use energy healing on yourself to unblock things in you. You haven't got any blockages though, in case you're asking about yourself. But for other people, yes. Yeah, you can do breath work, which breath work actually clears the chakras out and gets the chakras functioning correctly. But once the chakras are the main energy pumps, and once they're clear and you keep them clear, then everything else slowly starts to get cleared as well, because it's all coming through the chakras. But yes, if there's somebody with a lot of blockages everywhere, and the free flow system is one of them, and it's all seized up everywhere, then you can actually remove that with energy healing, and you can give that to somebody, or somebody can do it to themselves as in a self-healing manner. And yes, going back to your point about golden energy, originally it will be golden energy because healing energy comes from golden energy. We start with golden energy, and then we separate out the right frequency to use, and then we add the right programming on it through conscious intent, and we make it into healing energy. So yes, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, no, absolutely. And chakra breathing is so simple, and it's great if people want to learn also about the mechanics of what's going on. But even at the most basic level, you don't have to know what's going on. It's a mechanical thing. That's why breathwork is so good in that respect, is that you don't need to know what's going on. You just do the exercise and it works. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the material body layer. So the material body layer, everybody knows so much about this, or so they think, I guess. Most of mainstream healthcare is based around the material body. And I guess you could say that the reason for that is because you can see it and you can feel it. So naturally speaking, over thousands of years, that's what gets focused on first. The material body layer is at the bottom of the pyramid. It's got all these different layers on top of it. So if you remember the cascading effect of health and well-being down the pyramid, then the material body layer has got the weight of all those layers bearing down on top of it. So this is a little problem we have with mainstream healthcare at the moment, is that it mostly only takes care of the material body layer. That is changing, of course, that is starting to change, and emotions and psychology play a much bigger part now, and mental health, etc. It is changing slowly. However, most people still are very focused on the material body layer. But the problem is, when we see an issue with the material body, quite often that's the first time people really notice symptoms. That's when they get themselves off to hospital or the doctors. But that problem could have been manifesting for decades earlier in all the other layers of the pyramid, because some problems can fester through the layers of the pyramid, and then you only see the problem when it comes out in the material body. So what are the factors affecting the health of the material body? Well, one of them is genetics, you could say. Now, it's a very traditional view that you can't change your genetics. You're just born with what you've got. There's some truth to that, isn't there? But actually, recent research that is coming out says that that's not quite true. And that's the field of epigenetics. And we'll talk about epigenetics a bit later on. But essentially, epigenetics means, or these discoveries mean, that our genetics or our DNA is changing all the way through the course of our lifetimes by certain genes getting switched on and off. And these can actually be switched on and off due to our emotional state or our environment. It can have an effect. And then these changes can actually get passed on to offspring. So the next one is environment. Our environment can affect the health of the material body, of course. And we don't mean nature in that respect. We're talking about our surroundings, where we are, where we put our material bodies and what is around us. That can affect the health of the material. But the most important one, well, one of the most important ones that we're going to talk about in this course is self-care. Self-care affects the health of the material body. Of course it does. Now, a lot of these, there's only a certain level of control people can have. But self-care, there's a huge level of control that people can have. So this is why it's so important to teach people about self-care, self-healing. Again, remember, we're trying to bring spirituality, spiritual evolution into healthcare. And the last thing here is karma. Karma affects the health of the material body. And we'll talk about that a lot later on in the lessons. Now, one thing we want to mention here is the concept of fear, especially for the loss of the material body. It causes such amount of pain in the world. There's so much attachment to the material body. You could say that it's a symptom of our time, perhaps, that our materialistic world, the materialistic world view of these times currently, causes massive attachments to the material body. If we think that the material body is who we are, then obviously it's going to cause a huge amount of fear if we think about losing the material body. So part of what we want to do is also help people remove that dread, that fear when it comes to the material body. And reincarnation is a big part of that, teaching reincarnation. But we'll come back to that later on. So the self-healing techniques, the side 2 of the pyramid, and of course, no surprise, it's nutrition and exercise, are the self-healing techniques to keep the material body healthy. Now that's no surprise to everyone, and it's obviously well known. But still we have a problem for some reason. Still a big problem, because other factors come in, like self-discipline or time or finances or other reasons people come up with for not taking care of the material body. Now in the pyramid course that we teach to people, we're not teaching nutrition or physical exercise, because as healers we're not Generally speaking, we're not nutritionists or fitness coaches, although present company accepted, I have to say. There's half of this course currently are nutritionists. But generally speaking, as healers of network healers, we're not nutritionists. So what we say to people is that we don't give specific nutrition advice, and we don't go into it in major detail, but we have nutritionists ready and available to give us advice. So we do have nutritionists as part of that. But what we want to try and stay away from is trying to teach people stuff that there's lots of information about already. So as we go through the material body layer, whenever we talk about it, we try and bring a new edge into it and try and look at it from in a slightly different perspective. Any questions so far before I carry on? Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And you could take those reasons why people don't take care of it, you can take into the other layers, can't you? Like psychology, for example, self-discipline in the psychological layer, and unblocking chakras in the bioenergy layer. For example, enthusiasm, the emotion of enthusiasm comes through the sacral chakra. If we can get people to work on their sacral and keep that completely unblocked, then their enthusiasm levels will increase. So things like that, yeah. Right, yeah, okay, yeah. And there we're going into the psychological layer, into the idea of afflictions of the mind, and going back to the idea of changing our personality, deciding what we want our personality to be like, taking out the negative parts and increasing the positive parts. So a lack of self-worth would be an affliction of the mind that we can encourage people to label as an affliction, and then treat it in the same way as we treat any other negative characteristic or unhealthy characteristics. Right, so this is side 3 of the pyramid. So this side 3 is the results of self-healing, all the goals of self-healing, if you like, and it also shows the cascading effect of health and well-being down the pyramid. So first of all, for example, in the spiritual layer, if we go through the journey of meditation, eventually we will slowly find growing levels of peace and unity. In the psychological layer, if we work on certain techniques categorized as awareness of the mind stream, we will find or be able to choose healthy values. In the emotional layer, if we use certain techniques classed as karma emotion work, we will find or we will produce positive karma emotions, positive emotional memories, and that's increasing the positive, decreasing the negative. And in the bioenergy layer, the more energy breath work people do, the more clean their bioenergy layer will be. They will find balanced emotion chakras. When the chakras are clean, clear, and functioning correctly, then the rest of the bioenergy layer will clean itself up, because they are the major pumps. It's like the heart in the material body layer. Well, the chakras are the hearts of the bioenergy layer. And then in the material body layer, if we practice nutrition and exercise, of course, we will increase our chances of having a healthy material body. And the cascading effect here, peace and unity in the spiritual layer. If we can find peace and unity in the spiritual layer and spend as much time as we can there, and by the way, we don't have to be sitting down with our eyes closed, cross-legged, doing this to find peace and unity in the spiritual layer. This is something that people can achieve all day long while they're doing things, while they're living a normal life. Now, if we spend as much time as possible in peace and unity, then that has an impact on the psychological layer. It smooths out the psychological layer, because if you remember that cycle in the house, the more time you can spend feeling peaceful, the more those memories are going to slowly sort themselves out, smooth out, or get ironed out, and very slowly that psychological layer gets cleaned up. On top of that, you're actively choosing the characteristics you want and rooting out the ones you don't want. And then that impacts, the cascading effect impacts the emotional layer, because if we have mostly healthy values, then we are going to be producing mostly positive, calm emotions. And that is going to make us feel well because we're feeling more positive emotions rather than negative ones. And then that has an impact on the bioenergy layer. Of course it does, because if we're feeling positive emotions, we're not producing that negative emotional energy, which is what gets stuck in the bioenergy layer. Maybe I didn't say it before, but positive emotional energy does not get stuck because it's of a higher frequency. When you can feel energy, you can start to feel the consistency of emotional energy. And when you feel negative emotional energy, like hatred or anger or fear, it is thick and it's viscous. And you can really feel it's really sticky. Sometimes it even sticks to you. Sometimes if you've been around somewhere where a lot of people have been feeling those kind of emotions, you can walk through it and you get hit by it. You can feel it. And it sticks to you for ages. So actually you've sometimes got to clear it from you. Positive emotions don't do that because they're more wispy, they're more fluid, they disappear quickly, they're very light, they're higher frequency. So the bioenergy layer, balanced emotion chakras is what that gives you, which then has an impact on the health of the material body. Because blockages in the energy layer, bioenergy layer, or energy body, let's say, has an impact on the health of the material body. And we'll go into this later when we talk about anatomy. But blockages start causing problems in the material body. Over a long period of time, if we have big chakra blockages in the material body, then eventually you're going to start to see ill health in the material body. And lastly, I want to remind you, of course, about the silent inner peace revolution. So we've just seen side 3 of the pyramid, where the results of self-healing are that we transform our personality. We become more peaceful. And this has an impact on our lives, of course, inside ourselves. We feel better. We start feeling more compassion for people, more kindness, more tolerance for people, and all of these good characteristics. But then the more people do this, of course, it's going to have a massive impact in the collective. Not only in what we can see how people are acting, but actually in the collective mind. Because the collective mind is a repository for emotions and thoughts. People's emotions are constantly being uploaded to the collective mind, and it travels around like wildfire. This is why negative emotions can travel so quickly between people around the world, especially now with globalization. Everyone's so connected, but that emotional energy zips around everywhere. So, fear and anger is so big at the moment, isn't it? And that just travels around the collective mind. So the more people are actively trying to have control over their inner psychological state, the more it will start to transform the collective mind and the more effects that we will see in the world around us. And there we go. That's it for the PowerPoint today. So, anyone got any more questions or comments to make? The Kundalini energy K4, which we'll talk about that later on, but at the end of the Kundalini phase, that comes through and starts to transform things, and basically you stop producing karma at all. So that's one thing, that you can't fuel the emotional cycle anymore. The second thing is that the egoic identity crumbles during Kundalini awakening anyway, so there's no more mechanism left which is that you can call the egoic identity. Now remember, the low mind is still there and all its conditioning, so all the mind stream is still there, so it still feels like there is an identity there, but actually the mechanism has been destroyed. Can't fuel, because the mechanism of identity fuels it even more. That's gone as well. And more importantly, the first phase of self-realization is actually called the emotion engine. And this is where we burn off the remaining little bits of karma that we've got. So, if you remember what I said last time about to be able to be ready for a Kundalini awakening, you have to have a very small amount of positive and negative karma left in equal measures, actually, it actually balances. So when you go through the end of Kundalini phase, you've still got a little bit of negative karma to burn. And so that gets dragged through the process. So what you're feeling there, whether it's thoughts or emotions, is part of that. It's part of getting rid of the last little bits of karma. The thing you can be confident in, This also happens with rising levels of trust. The thing that you can be confident in is that it's just running a tank dry now, basically. So you're not producing anything more, it's just waiting for it to run out, basically. So every time that you're feeling that anxiety or having those thoughts, it's actually one last little bit. You know, it's going to run out soon, let's put it that way. And another thing is that the second phase of self-realization is called percolation, and that happens actually at the same time as the first phase. And what is happening there is that the triggering process in the mind is ironing out that conditioning in the mind. So every time you get triggered, that's part of the process. So that's the way you got to think of it now, is that it's just part of the process. Getting triggered and feeling the emotion is part of the process. And you're on a journey which you can't get off, you can't do anything about. You just have to be aware of what you're going through. But it's got a good ending. So this is part where the trust comes in, to trust the process, trust your higher mind, trust the source, and know where it's going, basically. Yeah. Okay. So now then we have to also talk about attachments to the material body, because that's part of the process as well, is to lose attachments to the material body, and unfortunately, it gets battered out of us. It's not a lovely process sometimes. So yeah, it's what we're deeply attached to, that the process goes in and batters. But eventually, you can notice it over the years that you get less and less and less attached to it. You let go of this, you let go of that, you let go of this, and then eventually you have no more reactions at all. And you can't do anything about it in a moment. When you're feeling that, you're in the reaction, you've got the thoughts, the negative thoughts, you've got the emotion. You can't do anything about it. The only thing that you can do is to be aware of what's happening. Now, this is completely different to before Kundalini, because before Kundalini, we would be teaching people emotional meditation or self-discipline or self-healing techniques of some kind. This is completely the opposite now, because you've gone past that point. Now it's about surrendering. It's about, okay, yes, what you can't do anything about, you have to accept. Yeah, no worries. So there is, go on. Yeah, no, it's hard, and it's hard, but I think it's also easy because you haven't got a choice. Yes, so we call that self-protection, and we've got a whole lesson on self-protection exercises. However, I would say another thing here is that we teach self-protection exercises to various different professions and people, like for example, health and social care staff and social workers and things like that. There's lessons on self-protection, and no healing course is complete without talking about self-protection exercises and things like that. However, I would say for you guys, you don't actually have to do any self-protection exercises, because self-protection exercises, the higher mind learns how to protect itself from astral entities, negative energies, things like that. It learns it through its journey of spiritual evolution. So at some point, the higher mind just starts doing things automatically. So for you guys, I would say you don't actually have to. It's important to know the exercises, because we need to teach it to other people. But there's no actual self-protection exercises that you guys need to do. And if you have in your lifetimes experienced the effects of negative energies or negative entities or these type of things, it's only because your higher mind has allowed it to happen, just so that you can be aware of it in this lifetime. Yeah. So there's different exercises that we teach in this course, combined with breath work, visualization exercises about burning off negative energies around you, things like that. And combined with the breath, they become more powerful. However, I would also say that as you go through Kundalini awakening and out the other side through the phases of self-realization, you do go through this little phase where things become more intense. So you suddenly start, if you might have felt certain energies beforehand, but as you go through Kundalini awakening, they suddenly intensify, even to the point where it's actually really, really uncomfortable. I went through this myself, and it sounds like what you were describing there, that sometimes I just couldn't. Or every time I would go into public or even meet other people, I would immediately start feeling their emotions, and it would be painful. It would be painful in the stomach area. And quite often when it's painful in the stomach area, it's because the sacral chakra has got the biggest opening, and inside this, around the sacral chakra, it's got what I like to call a macerator pump. It's a pump. It's a mechanism which chops up and neutralizes negative energies, and it all comes in the sacral, and sometimes it can give you horrible pains in the stomach. So, but that's just a phase. That's just a phase of this process, and after a while, your higher mind lets you off the hook, basically, because your higher mind is allowing this, and you're feeling it as part of what I was talking about earlier. That the negative part, which is the negative part of the process, which is actually triggering you, and that's the percolation part and the emotion engine phase of self-realization. So it's all part of the process. If you're going through this process, it's all part of the process. And yes, you can do exercises if you want to try and alleviate the symptoms, but at the end of the day, it's up to your higher mind whether you're going to be allowed to or not. And the phase will pass as well. It's not going to be like that. Yeah, absolutely. Like there's a reason why you're being put through it, basically. Yeah. I think Sue. Okay, that's a good question. So the Kundalini phase, what I keep calling the Kundalini phase, is where the energies start moving around. The Kundalini energies start moving around, and there's 4 that we talk about. And so first of all, if this is about you, then you're past the Kundalini phase. You're into the phase of self-realization, and everyone here is past the Kundalini phase. But let me just go back to just explaining the Kundalini phase a little bit, because there are certain points where you can judge where it is. But there's 4 energies really to talk about, and there's 3 energies in the Kundalini phase. There's one which we call K1, which goes up the spine. That it starts from a little bulb underneath the root chakra, and it goes up through the central spinal column, which is sometimes called the sushumna, and it goes through the major chakras. And if there are blockages in the chakras, it hits those chakras along the way. So we have to clear the way for it. We have to clear those blockages so that K1 energy can move up the spine. This is where we get Kundalini symptoms quite often. If there are chakra blockages in the lower chakras, then quite often you get Kundalini symptoms. And the Kundalini symptoms are neurological type symptoms, which are coming from that Kundalini energy hitting those blockages, sends shockwaves out through the nervous system, and you start feeling all sorts of strange things. Restless leg syndrome is one. Jerks, body jerks, and sort of shooting energies around the body, that sort of thing. You can start seeing lights. You can even start having out-of-body experiences. You can have a really vivid dreams sometimes, maybe flying dreams where you're flying around. There's all sorts of different neurological conditions associated with it, even IBS symptoms. If you Google Kundalini symptoms, you'll see a nice long list, but it's a bit scary sometimes, and it's probably best not to Google it. And not everyone was going to experience all of those things. You usually get 1 or 2 if you've got blockages in the lower chakras. And then as you go through as the K1 goes through the solar plexus, you start to notice things. You start to notice that you start to be able to hold your emotions away from you slightly at a distance. You're not always in that emotion, if you know what I mean. And this is the egoic identity which is starting to crumble. You also start to notice or start to notice how the identity is made. You start to notice the psychology in your mind, and you start to notice or feel like you're not necessarily the personality. And quite often people can feel a sense of losing direction or losing purpose, because they're losing what they thought they were. And as you progress through, as K1 progresses, you can know where you are by certain blockages as well. You know, you start to intuitively know where your blockages are, and then you realize you have to clear them to let it pass. So you tend to know where you are as you're working through it. And this is only, by the way, if somebody knows about it and they're working through it in that way, because some people have Kundalini awakening and they go through it without even realizing, of course. And then as you go through, so there's another energy that comes down from the ninth chakra down to the crown chakra. So an energy moves there. Basically, these energies are clear, are opening pathways. They're opening vessels, basically, is what these energies are doing. One comes down from the ninth chakra down to the crown chakra. The ninth chakra is the connection to the source of the universe. So when that happens, quite often you can see bright yellow or bright golden light above your head sometimes. Or other times you can feel really little prickly, funny little prickly feelings on the top of your head sometimes. Little tappy, strange sensations on the top of your head sometimes. And then there's another one, section 3, there's another energy, K3, that moves at the back of your head there. That one's a really sticky one, and that one always finishes at the end, and that's actually the final migration of identity. And we'll talk about that later on. But then you move into the phases of self-realization, and other things start to change. But I guess, in answer to your question, the easiest way I can answer your question is probably intuition. After all that, I think if you want to know where you are in your process, you've got to start opening up those channels of intuition and know it for yourself. Yes, your high mind has answered your own question, I think. So when we say Kundalini symptoms, I mean, I guess most of the time we're talking about those symptoms that occur in the early stages of the Kundalini phase, when there are blockages in the lower chakras and you get that hitting impact of the K1 moving up. But you could broaden Kundalini symptoms, you could broaden it to the whole journey, in fact, because Kundalini you can apply that to the whole of the journey of self-realization, really. And you do have all sorts of symptoms that you experience all along the way. They're coming from a different reason. They're not to do with blockages, for example, but you do get strange symptoms all the way through the transformation of self-realization. And I guess we don't call them Kundalini symptoms, but to not get them confused with the other ones. But yeah, you do get you do get all sorts of energy movements, you get all sorts of pains that can appear and disappear, you get all sorts of things are growing in you sometimes you can get heart palpitations. They're very common when a certain thing is growing, called a Mayer organ. We'll talk about that later on. But yeah, all sorts of transformations are happening. You know, one interesting one actually is at the start of the transformation process, your energy body is growing. Part of the transformation is for the energy body to grow and transform. And quite often in the early phases of self-realization, you're starting to download a load of golden energy from the source, because that's another thing that happens after Kundalini, is that you start getting your energy, golden energy, from the ninth chakra instead of through the chakras. But this can actually cause, if your energy body has to grow at the same time to accommodate it. And quite often in that sort of phase, the energy body is not quite grown enough, but you're downloading like almost too much energy sometimes, and sometimes you can get strange symptoms that occur because of that. So there's all sorts of little nuanced little things. What you kind of got to do, and it goes along with the journey of surrender, you kind of got to just accept all these strange experiences along the way and surrender to them, is kind of what you got to do. Now, I'm not telling people not to go and get themselves checked out. If there's a medical problem, always go and get yourself checked out, and you go through all the processes you have to go through. If you've got some sort of problem in the body, you go to the doctor, you go to the hospital, you go and get it checked out. You always do that. But it's what's in here that changes. It's the surrendering in here that actually changes. It doesn't matter if you're going to the hospital to get something checked out or not. It's surrendering happens inside. Right. Well, you could have some visitors around you as well, because that can sometimes happen. Right. there's an assignment for this lesson. It's a quiz this time, and so basically this is the first time we've used the quiz function on this. So it's a kind of a trial still. So we're just going. We've used it, and it'll be interesting to see what people think of it, how long it took people to do, how easy or not it is to use the tech side of it. So so if you go into classwork and an assignment for lesson 3, then you'll find it there. Some people have to go. Any final questions though? All right, lovely. Right, see you on Classroom and see you next week.